Before the sun rose, before bells called the castle awake, Lady Briar understood that her life had already been decided by others. Records suggest that noblewomen of her era often learned of danger through silence rather than warning, and Briar felt it in the stillness of her chambers. The air felt heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding breath. She stood near the window, looking down at the sleeping gardens where thorned roses grew wild and untrimmed. They had always reminded her of herself. Beautiful, yes, but never harmless. Somewhere beyond those walls, a contract had been signed, coins exchanged, and a man was moving toward her with purpose. Briar did not panic. Fear had lived with her since childhood, taught in careful lessons disguised as etiquette. Smile correctly, speak softly, never trust easily. Historians believe women like Briar survived court politics by reading danger early, and she had read it now with perfect clarity. She touched the briar-shaped ring on her finger, a symbol of her family's stubborn endurance. If death was coming, she would meet it awake, not trembling in sleep. She lit another candle, straightened her posture, and waited. In that quiet moment, fate shifted. Though neither she nor the man approaching her door yet understood how completely their lives were about to change. The man sent to kill Lady Briar had no true name, at least none he still claimed. According to surviving accounts, assassins in that century were often trained from youth, stripped of identity to ensure obedience. He had learned to move without sound, to breathe without urgency, to think of lives as tasks rather than stories. Until this night, that training had never failed him. He entered the castle as shadows entered water, unnoticed and expected. Every step followed a memorized path, every turn rehearsed in his mind. Yet as he reached Briar's chamber, something unfamiliar slowed him. Light spilled beneath the door. She was awake. This unsettled him more than armed guards ever had. Targets usually slept. They begged. They ran. He opened the door prepared for fear, but what he found was a woman standing tall, candle in hand, watching him as if she had summoned him. Her calm disturbed the careful distance he kept between himself and those he killed. Historians suggest that killers survive by refusing to see humanity, but Briar's gaze forced him to see it. He hesitated. That pause, barely a breath long, was enough to fracture years of conditioning. In that silence, he realized he was no longer certain which of them was truly powerless. Lady Briar studied the man before her with careful attention, the way she had learned to read allies and enemies at court. He was not monstrous, not cruel in appearance. He looked tired, the kind of tired that settled deep into the bones. She recognized it. She had seen it in women married for alliances, in men worn thin by loyalty to ruthless lords. She spoke first, her voice steady, refusing to give fear the power of sound. She did not ask him to spare her. Instead, she asked him a question that startled him more than any scream could have. She asked why. According to historical patterns, assassins were rarely questioned. They were final answers, not conversations. He should have ended her life then. Instead, he answered in fragments. Power, fear, lords who saw Briar's family as a threat. She listened, assembling truth from broken pieces. As he spoke, she realized something crucial. Killing her would not end the danger. It would only prove that fear ruled the world completely. Briar stepped closer, close enough to see uncertainty in his eyes. She made him an offer, not gold, not forgiveness, a choice. She asked him to leave with her, to let both of them disappear from the roles forced upon them. Historians might call this reckless. Briar knew it was necessary. For the first time, the assassin considered a future beyond the next assignment. Leaving the castle was not heroic. It was desperate, silent, and imperfect. Briar moved through corridors she had memorized over years of careful observation, while the assassin followed, surprised by her knowledge. Records suggest noblewomen often knew their households intimately, though few were credited for it. Guards passed without notice, distracted by weather and routine. A storm rose suddenly, thunder masking their steps, rain erasing tracks. It felt as if the world itself was undecided about stopping them. Outside the walls, horses waited, arranged by Briar long before this night. The assassin realized then that she had never been naive. She had always known survival required preparation. As they rode into the forest, distance grew between them and the lives they had known. Briar did not look back. The assassin did once, watching the castle fade into darkness. Something inside him loosened. For the first time, he was not following orders. He was choosing. When they finally stopped, soaked and breathless beneath ancient trees, silence returned. Briar thanked him without praise or debt, just honesty. According to later interpretations, this moment marked the beginning of trust. Not romance, not yet. Trust born of shared risk. Two people who had escaped different cages, standing in uncertainty, aware that returning was no longer possible. The days that followed were shaped by movement and caution. They traveled lightly, avoiding roads, blending into villages where names were unimportant. Briar learned quickly how invisible nobility became without symbols of rank. She cut her hair shorter, wrapped herself in plain cloth, and carried water like everyone else. The assassin watched her adapt with quiet respect. He taught her how to listen for danger, how to notice when birds fell silent. She taught him how to read people's faces, how to sense betrayal before it spoke. According to historians, partnerships formed in flight often balanced skills rather than power, and theirs did exactly that. At night, they shared fires and stories. He spoke of training that stripped away mercy. She spoke of a childhood where kindness was currency and mistakes were punished publicly. Slowly, something unfamiliar grew between them. Not passion, but recognition. They saw in each other the cost of survival. One evening, sheltering in a ruined chapel overtaken by briars, Briar laughed softly at the thorns crawling through broken stone. She said they reminded her of home. The assassin watched her touch the sharp branches without fear, and understood she had never expected safety, only endurance. In that moment, he realized protecting her had become instinct, not obligation. And Briar realized she trusted him not because he was strong, but because he chose restraint. Rumors followed them like shadows. News of a failed assassination spread quickly, carried by merchants and whispers. Rewards doubled. Faces were described. The assassin recognized the signs. Hunters would come, skilled and relentless. He urged Briar to separate, to disappear alone while he drew pursuit away. It was practical. It was safe. Briar refused. She reminded him that men had decided her fate once already. She would not surrender choice again. Historians often debate whether defiance or patience ensured survival, but Briar chose defiance with clarity. When the first hunter found them, the assassin acted without hesitation, neutralizing the threat before violence escalated. Briar witnessed the aftermath with steady eyes. She did not recoil. She understood the weight he carried. Later, she cleaned his wounded hands in a stream. Her movements careful, her silence respectful. That simple act bound them deeply. According to later interpretations, this was the moment affection hardened into loyalty. They were no longer escort and protected. They were equals, bound by shared danger and deliberate trust. From that point forward, neither suggested leaving the other behind again. In a world built on betrayal, they chose partnership as resistance. Winter approached with unforgiving certainty. Food became scarce, shelter unreliable. They found brief refuge among people who asked no questions, trading labor for warmth. Briar taught children letters by firelight, rediscovering joy in something gentle and human. The assassin repaired roofs, guarded paths, and learned what it meant to protect without being paid. According to records, such moments often tempted fugitives into believing danger had passed. It had not. One night, mercenaries attacked the settlement, careless and cruel. In the chaos, Briar was taken. Bound and silenced, she was dragged toward the capital she had fled. The assassin arrived too late, wounded and outnumbered. As the fires died, he stood alone with the choice historians have argued over for generations. He could vanish and survive, or pursue and likely die. He chose pursuit without hesitation. For Briar, captured and displayed as a symbol of restored control, silence became her weapon. She did not beg. She waited, because survival, she had learned, was not found in submission. It was found in patience and faith in chosen allies. The capital had not changed. Its stone towers still rose with confidence, its court still hummed with controlled cruelty. Briar was presented as proof that resistance failed. Promises of mercy were offered in exchange for obedience. According to historical sources, such promises were rarely kept. Briar said nothing. Meanwhile, the assassin moved through the city wounded but determined, relying on old contacts and forgotten routes. Each step closer felt heavier, but turning back was no longer possible. When he reached her cell at last, exhausted and bleeding, Briar did not cry. She smiled, not from relief alone, but from certainty. Their escape was not hidden. It was loud, costly, and final. Chains were broken, gates were breached, lives were lost, including names history never recorded. Together, they fled into the river beyond the city, cold water swallowing pain and fear. When they reached the far bank, dawn was breaking. Briar pressed her forehead to his, thanking him not for saving her life, but for choosing it. He made a vow then, not sworn to coin or command, but to stay. According to historians, this vow marked the end of his life as an assassin, and the beginning of something far more dangerous: freedom. What followed is debated by historians. Some records suggest they disappeared into borderlands, living quietly under false names. Others claim they joined growing resistance movements, aiding those crushed by the same powers that hunted them. What is certain is that Lady Briar never returned to court. No contract bearing her name was ever fulfilled. The assassin was never hired again. Their story survives not as legend, but as warning. It reminds us that even in systems built on blood and silence, choice remains. Love, in this account, was not gentle or poetic. It was deliberate. It was the decision to stand together when survival demanded separation. And in that choice, both found a future no one else had imagined for them. In the months that followed their escape, life slowed into something neither had known before. They lived on the edges of maps, where borders shifted often and authority weakened. Briar learned the rhythm of ordinary days, gathering herbs, mending cloth, waking without fear of judgment. According to historical studies, such simplicity was rare for women of noble birth, yet Briar adapted with quiet strength. The assassin struggled more. Silence, once a tool, now carried memories. At night, he woke from dreams of unfinished tasks and nameless faces. Briar listened without pressing, offering presence instead of answers. Slowly, he learned that survival no longer required constant vigilance. They began to speak of the future, cautiously, as if naming it too boldly might shatter it. Briar spoke of planting land thick with roses and briars alike, a place where beauty and defense could coexist. He spoke of teaching others how to disappear without harming anyone. According to later accounts, this period marked the softening of their bond into something deeper and steadier. Love did not arrive suddenly. It grew through shared labor, shared silence, shared choice. In choosing peace each day, they rewrote the meaning of loyalty, proving it could exist without fear or command. Yet peace, history reminds us, is rarely permanent. Old loyalties lingered, and power rarely forgave defiance. Word reached them that the lords who ordered Briar's death still searched for her, more from wounded pride than threat. The assassin suggested moving again. Briar agreed, but not in fear. She understood that running endlessly would eventually hollow them out. Instead, she proposed something unexpected, confronting the truth of her family's fall, not with blades, but with evidence. According to historical practices, secrets were the sharpest weapons of the age. Briar had memorized conversations, alliances, betrayals. Together, they traveled quietly, delivering truths to rivals of those who hunted them. Documents changed hands, alliances shifted, pressure grew. The assassin did not strike. He protected. Briar did not hide. She revealed. Slowly, the pursuit weakened, not through violence, but through exposure. Historians often overlook such resistance because it leaves fewer bodies. But it was effective. By the time winter ended, the contracts against Briar had dissolved, not cancelled, but made too dangerous to fulfill. For the first time, they slept without planning an escape. In that fragile calm, they understood survival could also mean standing still. With danger receding, Briar confronted a question she had long avoided. Who was she without her title or her fear? According to records, Many displaced nobles struggled with identity once stripped of rank. Briar chose creation. She began gathering women who had fled similar fates, offering shelter, education, and shared protection. The assassin watched as her leadership emerged naturally, grounded not in command but care. He assisted quietly, training guards only when necessary, always insisting on restraint. Their bond deepened through purpose rather than possession. Love, for them, became mutual respect expressed daily. They did not marry in ceremony. They did not declare devotion publicly. Historians suggest this was intentional. Labels had once made Briar a target and him a weapon. They refused both. Instead, they built a community shaped by memory and choice. Children grew safely among thorns and roses alike, learning caution without fear. At night, Briar and the assassin walked the perimeter together, speaking of nothing urgent. In those moments, they felt the weight of what they had survived and the quiet triumph of what they had built. Their lives became proof that endurance could transform into belonging. As years passed, stories spread quietly, not legends, but guidance. People spoke of a place where power failed to intimidate and silence did not mean submission. According to fragmented letters, rulers attempted to discredit Briar's influence, calling her dangerous not for weapons, but for ideas. The assassin understood then that her greatest threat had never been political alliance, but example. She showed that refusal could be gentle and still unbreakable. When sickness struck nearby villages, their community provided aid without demand. When disputes arose, Briar mediated without judgment. The assassin stood beside her, no longer defined by what his hands once did, but by what they now protected. Historians often ask whether redemption erases the past. Their lives suggested a different answer. The past was carried, acknowledged, and transformed into caution. On quiet evenings, they spoke of the night they met, not with regret, but with clarity. That moment of hesitation had altered history in ways no contract could measure. They never claimed heroism. They claimed responsibility. In doing so, they lived not above history, but within it, shaping it through everyday choice, rather than grand conquest. In later years, Briar aged visibly, without hiding it. She wore her lines like earned truths. The assassin, too, slowed, his movements careful, his eyes always attentive. According to accounts from travelers, they were known simply as guardians of the Briarlands. No titles, no myths. When asked about their past, they offered little. History, they believed, did not need their confession to exist. What mattered was continuity. Before her death, Briar planted a final garden, dense with thorned roses, winding paths, and open spaces for rest. She asked the assassin to promise one thing only, to stay present. When she passed quietly, surrounded by those she had protected, grief came without chaos. The assassin mourned without retreating into shadows. He remained, honoring her not through vengeance, but through care. Historians note this as the final defiance of his former life. He chose memory over disappearance, love over erasure, and in doing so, he completed the transformation begun the night he lowered his blade. Today, historians speak of Blood and Briar not as tragedy, but as testimony. Their story reminds us that history is shaped not only by battles and crowns, but by moments of restraint, by questions asked instead of screams, by choices made when obedience would have been easier. Lady Briar did not survive because she was spared. She survived because she recognized power and refused to surrender to it. The assassin did not change because he was forgiven. He changed because he was seen. Their lives demonstrate that love, in its truest form, is not escape from danger, but clarity within it. It is the courage to remain human when systems demand cruelty. Long after their names faded from records, their influence remained, carried in quieter practices of resistance and care. And so their story ends not with death or triumph, but with continuity. A reminder that even in ages ruled by blood, something gentler endured. Not untouched, not naive, but alive.